I'm Jane McElvany Coonce, and today we're going to be painting clouds. I'm going to do two demos: uh, cumulus clouds with blue sky, sunny day, and another photograph of sort of dusk when there's clouds in the sky, but there's lots of color too: purples, pinks, oranges, yellows. And we'll talk about how to handle those colors together so that they don't mix together and make mud. One of the things you want to do when you paint, first of all, I will say that I toned my canvas, if you see it here, with a very light, little bit of paint, burnt sienna, hardly any, mostly mineral spirits, and just washed over it so that it sort of looks like a watercolor. It's not thick paint. You don't ever want to use white in your toning. You don't have to tone a canvas. I mean, I've painted on white canvases. And one reason you might do it is that if you're painting the sky and you miss a spot, instead of white showing through, you'll have a little warm color showing through, and it kind of looks nice. That's the main reason for doing it. You also want to decide when you start a painting, do you want to do it, horizontally, or do you want to do it vertically? And usually it depends on, what you're painting. If you're painting, let's say you have clouds and you have a boat and then you have reflection, you might do it this way so you have plenty of room to do all those things. If you're going to do, let's say, like a cloud with just a beach or a cloud with some trees and grass, then you might do it this way. That's really up to the artist what they do, whether horizontal or vertical.
Jane, can you explain how you tone the canvas and what color you used and how much?
Yeah. I would say I probably used maybe the size of a quarter of a dime. So we're talking very minimal amount of paint. And I dip my brush in the mineral spirits and stick it maybe 3 times of mineral spirits on my brush into the mixture and mix it up. And I use burnt sienna. You can use any color you want. I like warm colors like burnt sienna, yellow ochre, something that's warm, because that way when it shows through, it has a glow to it. I know Agnes sometimes uses hot pink, and it does affect how the painting looks. And then what I do is I just take the biggest brush that I own, and I just kind of tone the canvas like this. Just brush it all over. It doesn't matter which way you brush, because the mineral spirits are so wet that it's just going to all bleed in and become even. So don't worry about brush strokes. They kind of disappear as it dries. It takes about, I'd say, anywhere from 10, 15 minutes to dry. It doesn't take very long. And then you're ready to go. A lot of times will tone them ahead of time. That way I know it's 100% dry. And if, let's say, it's slightly wet, it doesn't matter. It's so pale that if it mixes in with your paint, it's not going to be that bad. But I kind of like it dry so I can move things around. The other thing you want to think about is where do you want the horizon line? We never want to put the horizon line dead center. Never 50-50. That's kind of static looking. It's boring looking. It's better to either have it up a little bit above the middle line or a little bit below the middle line. If this painting is about the sky only, that is, it's a sky painting and the landscape is minimal, you might put your horizon line way down here. That way you have all this area for clouds and beauty. And then down here you would have a very minimal landscape, whether it's just, a little bit of land and a little bit of tree and not much. And that painting is about a sky. But normally landscapes are about the landscape and not the sky. I mean, the sky is an integral part, but not necessarily the main event. And in that case, what you want to do is you want to establish where your horizon line is. And what I mean by that is, where does the sky meet the land or the water? And in this case, I'm going to move it up. I don't want it halfway, so I'm going to move it up just a little bit, a little less than half. This is about more land and less sky. And I'm just going to draw a line, and that's where I'm going to do my sky. And what I like to do when I paint a sky is I kind of like to map out where the clouds are going to go. And one thing about our brains is our brain loves symmetry, and we have to be very careful because, a lot of times I see people do these little Hostess Twinkie clouds in the sky, and they're all the same size and the same line, and it's boring. So I would suggest that try to make things uneven. So I just drew with paint and I erased with a rag and mineral spirits. You can also draw with charcoal or pastel. I would not use a pencil. Pencil has a tendency to kind of, you can see through it a little bit. But I like to draw with paint because it's very easy to erase. So for example, let's say I'm going to do this cloud here. I want to think about, I mean, actually, the way we're doing it today is we're just focusing on a cloud. But when you do a painting, you sort of know what the landscape is going to be. And it might determine where you put your clouds. So for example, if you had a big cloud here and nothing over here, you don't want to put a big rock here because then everything's on this side. And when you hang the painting up on the wall, it might start tilting on you. So sometimes you want to think about that so that you balance things out and place them, in accordance to where you want it. So what I'm going to do is this one is almost, well, not quite. It's not quite dead center. But I'm going to kind of move it over just slightly, just so it's not dead center. I don't want it dead center. And I'm going to just draw what I think that shape is. Remember that I'm not married to this photograph. It's a suggestion. I do recommend having a photograph. It helps you plan a little better. And I'm going to have a big cloud here. There's a little smaller cloud here. And the bottoms of the clouds are pretty close to the horizon line. They're not always, but in this case they are. So, you want things uneven. You don't want things that are like, I don't want this cloud to be the same size as the one here. Otherwise, it's just too boring. It looks like two soldiers standing at attention waiting for orders. And I also want you to notice that in skies, and you can notice this when you're outside too, is the sky looks a lot darker at the top than it does as you get to the horizon line. So it's much darker blue here. As we come down, it gets lighter, and down here, it's much lighter. So we will paint it that way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sneeze first, and then I'm going to mix ultramarine blue and a little bit of cerulean blue and white. And this should make a nice, I'm going to keep it a little bit on, let's test this out. Yeah, that's pretty blue. I'm going to make the first stroke a little darker, and then we're going to get lighter as soon as we come down. And I'm just going to go straight across and sort of get this darker color on there.
Jen, when you're drawing with the paintbrush, what color are you using?
You could use any color. You could use I used ultramarine blue. You could use burnt sienna. You could use, but thin it down so it's very watery. You don't want it, if it's too thick, it's going to be hard to get rid of that line. Now I'm going to start adding some white, and as the next line that I paint is going to be a little lighter because the sky is going to get lighter as it goes towards the horizon. And with each stroke mark, I'll add just a little bit more white. And as we get to the clouds, I'm going to paint around them. These are cumulus clouds. We want them to stay white. If I painted blue everywhere and then tried to put the white on top, you're never going to get white clouds. You're going to have light blue clouds. So I'm going to just kind of keep adding white and get lighter and lighter as I come down. And do the other side too. And again, kind of paint around the cloud. And I don't want it to look like there's a stripe up there, so we'll come back to there in a minute and kind of blend it. I always put the paint down first and then blend second. And let's put a little lighter color right beneath the clouds. Oops, not lighter. And one of the things, don't ever be afraid, like if you put something down and it's too light or too dark, don't freak out. The nice thing about oil paint is it's very correctable. That's the beauty of it. Now, I might want to go a little darker blue right at the top because it does look like it's a little darker up there. I don't have to, but if I want to, I can just kind of come in and put some darker color up there again. And then I'm going to kind of soften everything just by kind of letting them run into each other and become softer. I think I'll put a little darker blue right in this corner. And then just kind of blend it down so that everything blends together. And so that's the first step of doing a sky. Now we want to put these clouds in, and we want them to be white, but we don't want to use pure white because it's too stark. You always have to add a little color to white. I'm going to add a little bit of a yellow, like a Naples yellow, or you could add a pinpoint of cad yellow light and white. We want it to look white, but we want it to look like a creamy white, not a yellow. So make sure you don't put too much yellow in it. Also, notice the shadow colors. The shadow colors, they kind of look bluish gray here, purpley gray here. And so, for the shadow, you can mix sort of the same thing, ultramarine blue, add a little bit of alizarin this time. And if it looks too purple, like let me just show you, here's, let's say this is a shadow. If it looks too purple to you, you can add a pinpoint, and I do mean a pinpoint of burnt sienna, and it will gray it down a little bit. That's probably too dark, but we're in the right family. The color alizarin crimson is a very strong color, so be careful and don't, probably way too dark. But let's go ahead. I'm going to just go ahead and put this shadow color down first. We always work from dark to light. Alizarin crimson is a very powerful color, so be careful and don't use much. We're talking like barely dip your brush, the little tip of the brush in there and put it on there because it will make everything red in your painting. So there might be some shadows right up here and maybe right here and right here. Each of these little balls of cloud have a little bit of shadow in them, so add a little shadow there. Now, I'm going to, instead of cleaning this brush, I'm just going to grab a different brush to do my whites. And I'm going to use white with just a little bit of color. Just, barely. I'm using Naples with white, but you could, like I said, you could use cad yellow as long as you just use a little pinpoint. And I'm going to put it on. I'm going to try not to blend it first. We'll blend it in a minute. But I want to try to get as clean a white as I can without, and as soon as you hit that purple, it's not as clean. Now, this looks very kind of almost cartoonish at this point, but it won't in a minute once we blend. One of the things about clouds is they're very soft. Most edges are soft, and we don't want it to look like a hard object in the sky. We want it to look like vapor. And so you have to be careful and not make too many hard edges. Now, right now, all of these edges are hard edges. And what I mean by that is you can see a definite between this and the background. So we're going to come in here in a minute and soften everything. But you've got to make sure you put enough paint down that you have something to blend with. So I'm just kind of putting my lighter white with just a touch of warmth to it so the clouds feel like they're... And there's actually a cloud up here that's very soft. We could actually do that right on top of the blue, because if you notice, I'm using the brush with the white paint, and it's not standing out like these are. It's very soft looking. And if you wanted to do a few more of those, like in the photograph, you could do that too. All right, so let's go in now and soften this. When you soften, I've been using a bristle brush, which is, the stiffer brush. You want to switch to maybe a softer brush, soft hair brush, one that when you touch it feels very silky and soft. And you always want to pull your light into your darker area and then wipe your brush. Or pull your white into the sky area and then wipe your brush. You do not want to pull the sky into the white, and you do not want to pull your shadow into the white. If you do that, you will not have any clouds. It'll be blue in about 1 minute. So you have to maybe make 1 or 2 strokes and then wipe your brush. Because what you're doing is when you make a stroke, you're hitting that sky up there and you're getting blue on your brush. And let's do it down the other way. We'll pull the white down this way. And we're starting to soften. We can always come back and, if we want some hard edges, because sometimes there are a few hard edges, but most of clouds are very soft. So what I'm trying to do right now is just come in here and pull the light color into the darker color. And always remember that, light you pull into the dark, not the other way around. I mean, if you make a mistake and you do it, you'll see why you don't want to do it. It's because you won't have any clouds. They'll be dark. Okay, pull these lights up into that shadow. Pull this light into the sky. So we're going around and we're softening everything at first. Still doesn't look like a great cloud yet, but it will. And if you lose your lights, I mean, we can add them back on there. Or if you lose your darks, okay, if you blend too much and the dark disappears, we can go back and add it. But we're trying to keep the white as we can right now. Okay, so everything's pretty much blended, but it's still a very big difference between this and this. So we're going to come in, I'm going to first blend the sky, and because the sky is lighter, I'm going to take it up into the shadow color of the cloud. We definitely want the bottom part of the cloud to be very soft. Light is not hitting there, and therefore we do not see where it stops and starts. So I'm pulling the light up into the shadow area, and every time I make about 2 stroke marks, I'm taking my rag and wiping my brush so that I'm not making everything the same color. Okay, so got the bottom softened. This still is too harsh between here and here. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to pull some more light down in here and try to soften that shadow just a little bit. If, let's say, you think you got the shadow too dark, you can always come back and add more paint that's lighter. For example, that right there is kind of dark. So I could come in, I'm going to pick up my shadow brush again, make it a little bit lighter, add a little white to it maybe. Kind of see if we can get the shadow just not quite so harsh there. I might also go in and add a few more little subtle shadows, not as dark as that purple. And just see if I can get a few more subtleties happening. There's also, that would be a white one. Might go back in and hit a few more whites, maybe put a little cloud right there. Over here, maybe pull that one up a little bit more. Pull this one out a little bit more. I'm just kind of making adjustments. I have stuff down, and now I'm kind of refining what I have down. Maybe over here it's kind of slant down, maybe make a few little clouds right in here, just little touches of them. I mean, part of it is you're designing. You want things to go up and down. You don't want just straight across. And this is the type of thing that you can fool with for quite a while. I mean, you can come in here, and again, you could pull this light into the shadow a little bit, or you could pull this light into the shadow up there. And if you overdo it, then you just grab your brush again and add some more light. I mean, just come in here and, you know, put some more lights in if you feel like you sort of lost something. So don't be afraid to adjust things. One of the things about painting, and I remember when I was first learning to paint, my teacher said, painting is nothing more than putting something down and spending the rest of your time correcting it. So what she meant was, you put down a base and then you begin to adjust things, adjust how dark your shadows are, or lighten things up, or darken things up. I mean, you know, a lot of different things. And so I'm just going to come in here and all I'm doing is just kind of softening a little bit. Keep clouds uneven, soft edges. If you want a few hard edges, you could come in here, and you could do this after it dries too. You don't have to do it while it's wet. You could come in here and put one that's really a hard edge and leave it. Maybe this one a hard edge. But it's easier to do when it's dry. And let's say after it dries, you look at it and you go, oh, I wish I hadn't put that cloud in there. I don't like the shape of that. You can also, either now or when it's dry, come back in and change shapes of things. I mean, you can, when it's dry, it's much easier, but even now I could come in here and kind of change the shape of this cloud a little bit if I wanted to. You're not stuck with stuff. You can always, you know, add some blue or add some white, just depending on which way you want to go. At some point it gets very wet, like right now it's getting very wet. It doesn't want to do much. So I'm probably at the point where this is done. Now, I did this in very quickly, and of course, if I were working on a real painting, I'd probably spend a little more time on it. So just to show you, though, that, you sort of outline what your pattern is, your design is of the clouds. You paint your blue, a little darker at the top, lighter as you come down, around that area. And then work from dark to light. Put your shadows in, and then put your lights in. And then we're going to pull the lights into the shadow and pull the lights into the sky. Get things soft looking. And then later on, you can adjust things if you need to. Like, I would let this dry and I would look at it later. One of the things I like to do when I do a painting is, when it's finished, when I think I'm done, why is that thing right in the middle of that screen? How do I get rid of that? Oops, I better quit playing. Can everybody see me? I think I just did something bad.
No, we can see you, Jane.
Just me?
Are you painting it?
I mean, as far as I can't even see myself now. All right, let me go up here. Okay. I hope it's still recording. I take this into like the bathroom and hold it up in the mirror and look at it in reverse, because when you look at it in reverse, you're seeing it in a totally opposite way, and you can really pick out anything that you don't like. Like if you think, oh, this looks just too perfectly shaped, it's not interesting enough, then you know to come in and cut in some blue. Another trick would be to take a photograph of it. And I photograph the painting and print it out in black and white. And I print this out in black and white. And I compare it. Did I get light enough? Did I get dark enough? And those kinds of tricks can really help you make your painting look better. So don't be afraid. Like if there's nobody around to give you advice. And personally, don't ask your spouse to give you advice, because they don't know anything about painting. They're going to tell you something crazy. Don't listen to them. The other thing I should have mentioned too was that where the horizon meets the water or the land, this should be perfectly straight across, especially if it's water. If it's land, let's say you had some mountains and then the mountains go down and we can still see sky down here. Well, yeah, your sky might be lower here, but the horizon line itself is always straight across. The earth may be round, but we can't see the roundness. It's So I'm going to leave this one. Any questions so far on this? All right, the next one we're going to do is one that is a little more difficult in the sense that they are clouds at dusk. I'm just straightening out some stroke marks that I can see as the light hits it. The other thing is, if you ever see a hair in your painting, like a hair comes out of your brush, get it out while the painting's wet. Once it dries, it's in there for life. It's like glued in there. All right, next one. It's a little smaller canvas, but again, toned with burnt sienna and a lot of mineral spirits. All right, in this one we've got some interesting colors. There are clouds, but notice that all the clouds are very soft, mainly because if the sun is not hitting them, you're not going to have the white edges. This is when the sun is getting ready to go down. It's not quite sunset yet. And so you have this sort of very, very soft look in these clouds. Everywhere you look is soft. And again, you can decide if you want to do it horizontal or vertical. Oops, horizontal or vertical. And make up your decision before you start painting. So once again, I would decide where is my horizon line. We don't want it dead center. So we either have a little bit less sky and more land, or more sky and less land. I'm just going to make it less sky and give me room for land, whatever we're going to do next week. And next week what we'll do is we'll continue working on these paintings and we'll put in a landscape. I'll send you a bunch of landscapes that you can pick from, or you can use your own landscape too. But we'll talk about trees and how to paint them. In this dusk type painting, you're not going to have a real definition in anything in trees, grass. Everything is going to look almost like a silhouette. So it's going to be a little darker than the day scene, where the blue sky and the white clouds, you're going to have more realistic colors. One of the things, again, I would do is the same way we started, is I'm going to just kind of draw where I think I want things. So I'm just going to take just a little bit of blue, and okay, I see this cloud is kind of coming up at a diagonal. I kind of like that. I think that's pretty. And we have a little bit of this cloud coming this way. And we have this beautiful yellow in the middle. I would suggest painting all the light colors first. And the reason is, if we paint this purple and we start putting that yellow in and we hit that purple, we're going to end up with really dirty color. So I'm going to do just sort of the opposite of what we did last time. And this time I'm going to paint white with just a pinpoint of cad yellow. So I'm going to take some white, and when I say pinpoint, I don't mean, you don't need much. Test it out, put a little bit in at a time, and if it's not yellow enough, then add a little more. But it's very quickly that yellow can get really yellow. So the yellow is not at the horizon line. It's up in here, which I did put a little purple, so I think I can get some of that in. I'm going to put it on pretty strong and pretty thick. And I see it's hitting the tops of these clouds with some pinks and stuff, but I'm just going to first draw it in. And then it comes down here like this. There are some kind of pink or peachy colors in here, and there's some light up here too. So all I'm going to do is just wherever I think I see light, I'm going to go ahead and put it in. And we can adjust it as we move. If you see a little peachy color, you can add either a little cad red light, and I mean a little because that's a strong color, not as strong as a lizard, or you could use cad orange and mix into your yellow color. Probably not going to be able to see it on this toned canvas, but in a couple places I see a little peachy color. I also see a little pinky color, and for that you could use a alizarin, but again, remember, a little goes a long way. So if you're going to use alizarin, put it into your Naples and white, or your cad yellow and white, and wherever you see a little pink, go ahead and put that down. We can always come back when it's dry too and play with those colors. So if you kind of go overboard with the dark purpley blue gray, we can still fix it. I mean, it's not like you're stuck with it forever. All right, so now I'm going to begin to put in, there's some places that have blue in it, and there's some places that are much darker. Because I'm afraid I might lose those lighter areas, and like I said, it's hard to at least wet to get those areas back. I'm going to just put, wherever I see a little bit of light blue, I'm using cerulean and white. I'm going to just add a little bit of light blue, just in a few places. And you can see that this is a little more complicated painting. I mean, it's lots of different colors, more than we had last time. And you might even feel like you're getting lost a little bit. Not to worry. I mean, if worse came to worse, okay, here's the purple. If worse came to worse, you could paint the whole thing purple, let it dry, and then come back in and put lighter colors on top. There's always more than one way to paint something. Now be careful as you go around the yellow, just like when we did with the clouds. We're going to do sort of paint by numbers and try not to hit that yellow at first. We are going to have to eventually blend it, but right now we're going to try to keep it, oops, I just hit alizarin crimson. We're going to try to keep it sort of away from the yellow as much as we can. So I'm putting sort of that darker purple down. And as we get close to that yellow, we will get that soft. Right now it's going to look a little hard edge, but we'll get it softer looking in a minute. I call this blocking in, where you're just putting color down. You're not refining it. You're putting it down, and you're, getting something on the canvas so that then we have something to work with. And just notice if it looks darker here and a little bit lighter there. Try to do that. I mean, if you don't, you can fix that too. Everything's fixable. All right, so I'm trying to get the purples down where I see them. And when you put purple next to red, it's very pretty. It blends nicely. When you put purple next to yellow, you could end up with mud very quickly. So you got to be very careful and not blend that yet. All right, so here we have a few of these darker purple clouds. And I can immediately see that I didn't get light enough with my sky. So we'll get that lighter in a minute. And as we come down here, some of these are kind of light. A little lighter purple down here. And it gets a little darker over here, but I'm going to first put the lighter down and then we'll put some darker down. Okay. As we get close to that yellow, I want to be very careful. I think I'm going to just take a little bit of the pink color, the alizarin, and put it right next to the yellow so that if I get too close to the yellow with the purple, it'll hit the red, and red and blue make purple. So looking at our color wheel, if I accidentally hit purple with the yellow, I'm going to get a gray. But if I hit purple and red, it's going to be in the more purpley areas. Or if I hit blue with red, it'll be purpley colors. We definitely don't want to have yellow and blue touch each other because then we have green. And you don't want green in your sky. So you got to be very careful when you're working around that yellow. That yellow can cause problems. All right, so now we've got a sky kind of blocked in. We want to refine it so it looks better. I'm going to put a little darker purple right there. I'm also going to take a lot of white, just a little bit of cerulean, and see if I can lighten the sky up in a couple places. That's still not light enough. Yeah. It'll take a lot of light, I think. I want some light areas of blue sky in here. There's one over here too. And then what I want to do is I want to soften, just like we did before, but this I have to be very careful because, like I said, this purple's next to yellow, and we want to be very careful as we soften. So I'm going to pull and wipe after every stroke mark this time. I'm not going to do 2 stroke marks like I did on that other one. Every stroke mark, I'm wiping my brush to get rid of that purple. And I'm pulling the yellow into the purple. Yellow and purple actually are very pretty next to each other because they are opposite the color wheel. They make the eye excited. Colors that are opposite on the color wheel excite the eye. And so it makes for a very interesting color combination. That's a little bit of hard-edged line. So I'm going to come in here and pull the light down into the purple a little bit. See if I can soften that a little bit. So this is looking nicer. It's softer. Now let's see if we can soften this a little bit. This I might have gotten a little over dramatic with the orange, but I'm going to just soften it first and then we can adjust. Again, I'm taking the pinky orange up into the purple and the yellow up into the purple, and I'm wiping my brush every time, trying to keep that yellow clean. Soften this little light blue. Now sometimes it gets so wet that you can't really get your lights on there after a while. I mean, after a while it's just so wet, it's just not gonna, you're not gonna get light. And that's when you're gonna have to let it dry, and after it's dry, come back in and hit your lights again. What I'm trying to do right now is get everything very soft so that it feels like, right now that feels like a line there. But if I come in here and pull this light down into that line, I can break it up and it'll feel soft and very pretty. Now, one of the things you can do too is, let's say you've gotten it pretty softened, but now you feel like that yellow doesn't really feel very light anymore. I mean, it feels like it's either just gotten too much paint blended into it, or it just doesn't look bright. I can go back in with a lot more white on my brush. However, every time I put it down, I need to re-dip because I'm picking up whatever I'm hitting. So I'm using a little cad yellow and white. And I mean a lot of white because I want that really light there. That's sort of, oops, kind of thick paint there. Let's see if we can get this. Now, sometimes people like brush strokes and they leave it like that. They don't blend it out. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. I'm going to put a little highlight right in there. And I'm tapping on the highlight now. These clouds feel like they have a little highlight, but they're kind of not as bright. You can blend if you like, or you can leave it sort of very strong and leave the stroke marks. I do sort of like that little light hitting the edge of that purpley cloud, so I might come down here and hit the edge of that purple cloud just a little bit. And like I said, if you feel like things are blending too much and you can't really, like the peach has kind of disappeared, we can try to get it in there again. But the other thing would be to wait and put it in when it's dry. And the reason this one is harder than the other one is because we're dealing with a lot more colors. I mean, we really are. If you want to kind of get that little feeling of sun rays or something, you can try when it's wet. It's a lot easier when it's dry. Anyway, like I said, it's the type of thing that you kind of play with, and I'm kind of crammed in here, but normally I would step back and take a look at things to see how are things looking. Does it look like it's, feeling cloud-like and soft? Does it need more blending? Does it need other colors? There's a little bit of blue up here that I didn't put in at first. Not that I have to follow this exactly. I don't. I mean, it's a guide. But you want it to be attractive, and you want to like what you've put down. I'm going to kind of see if I can, see, I have a little purple on that brush. Now I'm going to dip in the white again with just a little bit of yellow. See if I can get this clean. Yeah, there. But this is the kind of thing that you could also just wait and when it's dry, come back in and hit it one more time with some light. All right, now, couple other things. See how there's a little bit of light on top of this purple? You can do stuff like this, although it looks like I sort of lost I've got this yellow coming down and not enough of that purple. But if I wanted to put that in there, I could just put it in wet into wet, and it will be very soft and look very nice. So I could just come up here and kind of tap it on the top of that cloud. And if I have to, I could even come in and put a little, if I wanted to show that up a little bit, put a little more darkness underneath it, just accentuate that sort of thing. The other thing is diagonals and lines that move up and down are more interesting than just straight across. I mean, obviously when you get down here, it has to be straight across, but as you're placing clouds, try not to just have them all line up at the same place. I'd like this one to be higher here and a little lower here. This one, actually, I could even soften this one a little bit if I wanted to. One of the things you can do to soften is you could let it dry, and then next time with a brush with very little paint, and you wipe most of the paint off, you can come in here and just kind of, what I would say, scrub on top of that just to soften that edge a little bit. It gives you a nice look too. But I got to be careful that I don't want to end up with mud in here. All right, don't like that one piece of light right here. It's too yellow. Problem is it's very wet, and as I put stuff down, I can end up with it. All right, any questions so far about this sky? So what I'm going to do, whoa, look at my face. I got paint everywhere. What I'm going to do is, for next week, we're going to continue working on these paintings. I would like to see if you can paint the sky. If you're a new painter, do the one with the blue sky and the white clouds. I mean, that's really, I'm not trying to say it's easy. It's hard in the sense of trying to make them soft and not look like objects floating in the sky. But It's easier than playing with colors and not getting muddy. If you feel like doing both, you can. The nice thing about this one is the landscape will be very simple because it will be more like a silhouette. Even though this is green, we don't want to use a bright green because the sun's going down, so nothing's bright looking. It would probably be a gray green, and it would be a dark green. If you had a boat in here, let's say it was a white boat, in the blue sky, white cloud one, you'd have a white boat. I mean, add a little bit of color, but it would be pretty white. In this, a white boat's not going to look white. It's going to look more of a blue-gray or a purple-gray because there's not enough light to show you how white it really is. Another pretty thing is if you're going to put water in your landscape, look how this light reflects here and here and here, and even right towards the beach where the water's just, barely covering the sand. It's all directly under, which is very lovely. I guess this one is probably that little piece there. But you would not have light over here or over here. It's going to be where the main event is. So over here where there's light, it would be more of a light blue, whereas this is a light yellow or a light peach. So keep that in mind. I am going to send a couple photographs out of landscapes that will go with these. You can use them or you can use your own. But what you want to look for, at least in this one, is something that's more of a silhouetted type thing. Whereas in the day one, the blue sky one, you can pick out anything. All right, somebody's unmuted and we're hearing a little squeaks. All right, well, everybody, let's do this. I'm going to cut the recording off, and then everybody, let's go back to everybody getting together. Let's see. First of all, I got to turn this recording on.